Okay, so as Joe Bradley mentioned earlier, he is going to come up, tell us a little bit about, remind me what you're talking about, debt ceiling?
Yep.
Debt ceiling raising. I'm sure some of you have some questions for him. So, Joe, if you want to come on up, as most of you know, Joe works with Representative Jason Smith's office.
Trying to trick me, Bill.
All right, I'm going to steal this from you and then
Thank
let's
you.
have the podium.
Good evening, everyone. Like Joe introduced me, like I said before, my name is Joe Bradley, and I work for Congressman Jason Smith. And he just wanted me to come around. I've gone to a couple other counties just to explain and answer any questions anybody had about the debt ceiling agreement. I know at this point it seems like old news, but there are still some concerns about it. So I was just here to explain a little bit why the congressman voted yes and why the deal is necessary. So first of all, I just want to explain that we, the Republican Party, only control 1/2 of 1/3 of Congress. So any agreement that was going to have to be made was going to have to get through the Senate and the President's desk. Now, we twisted screws, especially the Speaker of the House and his negotiating team, but there was only so far you could go. There was also a real threat made by some of the more moderate members of the party, especially Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, who represents the Philadelphia suburbs, and he said if the bill went too far, he would break and vote no, and him and a handful of moderate Republicans would go make a separate deal with the Democratic Party. And because at the time, the Republicans only had a 4-seat majority, all it would take is 5 moderate Republicans to break, and they would have signed a separate deal, and it would have been worse than what we got. So when you take that all into consideration, remember that the deal was the best deal we could get under the circumstances. Another thing to remember about this bill is it's the first time since the year 2000 that federal spending will be less than it is the year previous. So that's a big deal. This debt ceiling agreement also cut the deficit, not the deficit because we're still taking on debt, but cut the budget by about $1 trillion over the next 10 to 15 years. Also, while the debt ceiling was raised, and that means any new debt can be accumulated between now and January of 2025, anything over the current limit has to be approved by Congress, which means it has to go through the Republican House. So if Biden, like he recently said in a speech, he promised $780 million or something to a college in California, that funding has to get approved by the House of Representatives. So if the House says no, it's not going to get passed. So while there is a limit, and if an emergency happens or something else, debt will be taken on. But that takes an act of Congress. So that means every single step from now until January 2025, even though a default isn't going to happen, any additional spending that the president wants to do will have to go through Republicans. And with Jason Smith as chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, it also means that there's going to be no new taxes. There's going to be nothing wrong with trade deficit, and that means any trade agreement that the president wants to try to jam down people's throats isn't going to get passed. So, was this deal perfect? No, but it was a compromise. And remember, and this is the congressman's opinion too, if the far left hated it, and they voted no, the AOC types, the Maxine Water types, they all voted no. They didn't like it because they wanted a clean debt ceiling. They wanted no questions asked, spend another $12 trillion. We got the Democrats and the President of the United States to agree to cut spending and to agree to limits. The era of reckless, endless, no questions asked spending is over. So was it perfect? No, but it was necessary and it got the job done and it reined in the Democrats and it keeps them in check. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to ask. Or answer, not ask. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Chris Minster. Jason used to be our rep until redistricting.
Same for me. I work for him, but I can't vote for him.
So I tell you what I worry about more than the debt ceiling, because I don't know that we're ever going to get this country off the borrowing crack pipe. So what worries me more is that Congress has failed to pass a budget on time in 27 years. And I'm sorry, but Jason's part of it. It's a massive failure on their part. In 3 of the last 10 years that I can think of, we funded the country with continuing resolutions for a whole year.
Yeah.
Without that budget stability, government agencies can't provide services people need. The military is operating on a quarterly budget. Do you know how hard it is to plan a training event when you don't know how much money you're gonna have in the next quarter?
So yeah.
I would love for you to carry the message to him that, you know, we don't need a bunch of new laws. We don't need more government oppression. Just do what we hired you to do, and one of the things they have to do is provide a budget by April 15th, and they can't do it. It would be really nice.
Yeah, and I agree. Jason has tried to get that with the Ways and Means Committee, and he used to be chairman of the House Budget Committee. One of the biggest hurdles with that, though, is also tends to be the Senate. They are incredibly slow with that sort of thing. I think out of the last 27 years, about half of those or more, the House passed the budget and the Senate sat on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's not unusual. As we know from Missouri politics, the Senate also has a tendency in Jeff City to sit on a lot of things. So, but I will relay that to him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know it was a compromise, but
Yeah.
more Democrats voted for in the House than the Republicans did. to
Yeah,
pass
about
this.
60 Republicans bolted, yeah.
Yes, I mean, so it ended up more Democrats, so the Democrats definitely liked it better than the Republicans did.
So,
My concern is, like he said, are we actually gonna get the 12, budget, the 12, what do you call it, appropriation bills through? Or is it just gonna be, push comes to shove, the Senate's not gonna do anything, and it'll be one big omnibus bill again?
so I will make this clear. While I cannot, and the Republicans cannot deliver the promise guaranteed that those 12 appropriations bill will happen on time, the Republicans made it very clear that there will be no omnibus bill. And they will not tolerate that, and they made it very clear to the president, and that was one of his agreements. Now, again, that was made by just word of mouth, but
Well,
that is...
Will they shut the government down? In other words-
I would believe that McCarthy would take that step to shut the government down to prevent an omnibus bill, yes.
Okay.
And that was something he told the Freedom Caucus, even though they still voted no. That was still a guarantee, but they still disagreed with it for other reasons, as you know. But I fully believe, and Jason's committed to that, that if it comes, push comes to shove, they will shut down the government. Because again, a shutdown is not a default, and there will be no omnibus bill. Any other questions? Yeah.
I just wanted to brag on your boss a little.
Oh, thank you.
My understanding in Jefferson City was people were saying he wanted to be chairman of Ways and Means. And to get that, we haven't had somebody on that kind of hierarchy in the United States Congress in like almost forever. And he got that. And if I say that every dollar of the United States Treasury goes through his committee, I might be exaggerating, but I don't think by much. And one of the first things that we were told in Jefferson City that he did is he took his committee away from the Capitol and took it out amongst the people.
Yeah,
so people could actually witness exactly how the United States, basically their treasury worked and how Ways and Means worked. So I'd like you to expound on it a little bit because everybody was buzzing about that at the Capitol.
Yeah, so they tried to do it in May. They were unable to do it because of the debt ceiling negotiations, and Washington came to a gridlock essentially. But what Jason Smith, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, has tried to do, and he did it in February and March and again here in June, and I think they did in April as well. They've gone to different places in the country and held Ways and Means meetings and committee meetings essentially. So, and then they talk with local business leaders, local politicians, and so one of the first places they went was West Virginia. They've been to Ohio. I think they've gone to New Hampshire too, and then they're going out west again too. I think Oregon and Nevada. So he's taken the committee out west, out of anything's west of DC, and they're out there talking, trying to make it to where policy fits local people in not only how to save money, but the money that you spend, how to spend it most effectively, so where it helps people most in need. So they've gone to all sorts of places, and it's actually, strangely enough, I'm glad you mentioned it, Phil, something that a number of Democrats agreed with them on. So they were happy to go to West Virginia, like Joe Manchin was extremely happy with that, and this bill also made that new pipeline. So, any others?
So you gave a figure of 1 trillion for the next 10 to 15 years?
At least, yeah. It could be more if the Republicans, if they manage to take the Senate and the presidency next year.
And where was all that spending cut at?
Most of it was cut out of COVID relief, and then also a number of other programs like mostly welfare and stuff, because we now have a job requirement. So to get certain welfare programs, you have to have a job, and if you don't, you get cut. So that was a big thing. It's something that the Democrats didn't want to do at all. Yeah.
Were there any cuts in non-discretionary spending?
No, that was off the table, not only by the president, but that was
So
off.
they increased.
But the vast majority of Republicans opposed that too, including Donald Trump was against that. Social Security, Medicaid was not talked about.
So they increased.
That was actually maintained. Any of the spending that Biden added had to be accepted, but there was no major increases to it, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joe, appreciate it.